Or are there elements within the United States establishment or in the Canadian establishment who are enablers of people like Nijjar and Panu? Sushant Sareen, the Prime Minister, made an important point where he said there is strong bipartisan support for the strengthening of this relationship. A clear indicator, as he put it, of the mature and stable partnership. Security and counter-terrorism cooperation have been key components of our partnership. That remains very strong. At the same time, are both America and Canada ignoring India's vital national security concerns on Khalistan terror? Because our consulates have been attacked, our diplomats have been threatened, and there is an attempt to, by these Khalistanis, to use their clout for crime, drug peddling, human trafficking, all of that in our country.
So, Gaurav, between Canada and the US, I'll make a slight distinction. The US wasn't a problem until recently. This Panu character used to be out there, but he was a lot of hot air. But in recent, Canada was, of course, a country of some serious concern to us, which is why we were reacting as strongly as we were. But now I think this issue is going to come up increasingly with the United States, especially given the fact that, our missions have been attacked and this guy has actually threatened a terrorist attack. Second point, I would like to ask Seema that if Seema sitting in New York was to issue a statement like Panu has issued against an American airliner in which she said Mexicans should not travel after such and such date because then their life will be in danger, what would have happened to Seema? Number two. Which is what leads me to believe that somebody in the American system is cultivating this Pannu character, using him as some kind of a cat's paw. These intelligence guys always have these games which they play and they will keep playing. And finally, on the Indian Americans, look, number one, I have very little use for Indian Americans in the academic community. Most of them, try and behave too loyal than the white man himself and spout all kinds of nonsense about India. They have no stake in India. They have nothing to do with India, but they only find relevance in India. All these professors and think tankers, they have nothing to do with India, but they will talk about China, talk about Mexico, talk about Canada. Why do you talk about India? You've already gone away from India, number one. Number two, about these politicians, how is it that there were no Mexican-American politicians who took a special briefing? There were no some other politicians who took a special briefing. Why did only these 5 Indian Americans need to weigh in on this matter? We don't need them to tell us what to do.
Okay.
So why are they behaving
multiple volleys fired. Respond to these, and if I may, in your appreciation,
Seema is a very good friend. I have a lot of respect for her writings and everything, but
absolutely,
it's just my way of pushing back.
Absolutely, no, go ahead, and it's no holds barred. I'm not controlling any part of any of this, but does the Pannu episode have the potential to adversely impact India-US relations? Seema, please respond. The floor is yours.
Okay, so in my latest column, I've already said that a certain amount of trust has been eroded, but for different reasons. On the American side, the executive branch feels that, if India can take or allegedly take such actions in a friendly country, what are we talking about? For India, it's all about Western hypocrisy that, how can they harbor a man like this? Definitely a really vile man whom I've blocked, on all the media. Thing is, by giving him so much publicity, are we, indirectly helping him become a bigger, phenomenon than he is or was? Number two, about the Indian American congressman, I agree with Sushant about the academics. I don't want to go there because that would take up too much time. But about the politicians, they were, I think, insulating themselves for future, problems that may arise if this issue is not adequately addressed, because we cannot deny that this is a problem in the relationship. I still would emphasize the way both sides have handled it 5 years ago. I wouldn't have expected that. Okay. And the Canada situation is completely different. Nobody disagrees that their politics are completely beholden to this, sort of extreme bunch of people who call the shots. Even their bureaucracy is completely penetrated. Here, I don't think it's like that. But I would agree with Sushant that intelligence communities everywhere, they have their own games. I'm sorry, I don't have a real insight into that. If the American intelligence was, if he's an agent for them or anything like that, I have no clue.
Okay, but India well within its rights, Ambassador Sikri, to feel very disappointed, not just with Canada, but even with the United States of America for not taking action. Canada against Nijjar and the US against Panu. After all, he's threatened bodily harm to passengers on board Indian Air India post the 19th of November. But Ambassador Sikri, I want to draw your attention to a statement that both Sushant Sareen and Seema Sarohi have referred to of 5 Indian American lawmakers who said, and I quote, "We believe the US-India partnership made a meaningful impact on the lives of both our people, but we are concerned that the actions outlined in the indictment could, if not appropriately addressed, cause significant damage to this consequential partnership." Is this a threat to India?
Well, first and foremost, it's a generic statement. I agree with some of the aspects that both Seema and Sushant have touched upon. It's a generic statement by them. They're insulating themselves. They don't want to be caught on the wrong foot later. And possibly the so-called briefing that they had, they were told some of the things that they should be putting out. But let's be very clear, these 5 Indian American origin congressmen, they've made many statements in the past before. They've never been very gracious and kind to the country of their origin on many occasions in the past. So I would not attach too much importance to this statement. I would like to think more that there is some element in the US that is trying very hard to derail the relationship. Let's not get away from that, and let's not also see that is there any truth in what they're trying to say. I mean, that is the point, this high-level inquiry that is there in India. Seema herself wrote about that so-called note from MEA not passing the smell test. So I think this kind of made-up stuff, let's see where it lands up, where it comes out. I mean, Nikhil Gupta himself, his family has filed an appeal in the Supreme Court of India. So let us see where it goes. But I think the overall effort not to derail the relationship that has come out in Prime Minister Modi's statement, that is the important point to keep in sight. We will not let these individual elements do that. And we continue with our own efforts to A, carry forward the relationship, and B, to make it very clear that we are not going to tolerate these kind of statements, calling for bombing of airlines and calling for, saying bombing the parliament and so on. I mean, this is
or threatening our diplomats, painting a target on the backs of our diplomats, and actually setting our consulate on fire in San Francisco. Sushant Sareen, frankly, in any civilized conversation, US and Canada should be on the back foot. Their silence on terrorism, their silence on extremists operating from their soil, despite claiming to be a strategic partner, no action has been taken. And frankly, what should have been dealt with privately is aggressively made public. You see this as American intimidation tactics or the West's intimidation tactics?
No, there are a couple of things at play. I think one, as Seema very correctly identified it, it's Western hypocrisy. It's also Western exceptionalism that we can do certain things, you dare not do it. You do what we ask you to do, don't do what we do. That's the ruling motto of the West. So I think one is that factor. The second is, of course, they are trying to turn the screws on us. They are trying to bring certain amount of pressure on us and seeing whether, we'll wilt, whether we'll blink, whether we'll give in, whether, our knees will buckle under. Let's see how that works out. I don't think it's going to play the way they're expecting it to play out. But I think, Gaurav, it is very important for the Indian side to impress upon the Americans that, look, these are not the raving and rantings of a lunatic like Panu or these other Khalistani scum who live out there, perhaps under CIA, FBI patronage. I don't know whose patronage they live under. The important thing is that these are having real life consequences in India.
Absolutely.
These are having consequences because they are funding, weapons smuggling out here. They are funding drugs out here. They are funding criminal activity. They are funding assassination campaigns in India. It is becoming a big problem. And these are real life consequences. These are people with a track record of having blown up an airline 30 years back.
Yes.
These are real problems.
And I will let that be the last word on this part of the show.
They can play games with this, then I think they have another thought coming, because there are certain red lines even India has. The Americans need to understand it. If it's just hot air somebody is blowing, no problem. He can go and say whatever the hell he wants to say.
Okay.
Nobody will give a damn about it. But if it's having real life consequences, then it has to be addressed.
And perhaps India too should get its dossiers together on these terrorists and terror supporters and send them across to the United States of America. Seema Sarohi, Ambassador Veena Sikri and Sushant Sareen for joining me here on India Today. Many thanks.